What's going on, everybody? It is Overreaction Time once again. I'm your host, Simon Samano, and welcome to this special look back at 2024, look ahead to 2025 edition of ORT. And first of all, I got to let you guys know off the top, you see the one and only gorgeous George Garcia on the screen from MMA Junkie Radio. He's here with me, but I'm going to let you guys know right now, we have other guests coming on later to entertain my overreactions to 2024 and 2025. But we start with George. And George, how you doing, man? You good?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Was 2024 a good year for you? Was it a good year for Garcia?
Yes, because in late 2023, my mom had a serious injury, and in 2024, she recovered from it. So that makes me happy. I'm going to see her in a few hours when I travel, and I would say yes. That was my main focus this year.
That's what we love to see, man. That's what I love to hear. All right, dude, we're going to look back on some big stuff here in 2024, look ahead in 2025. Are you ready to rock and roll? You're first up.
Let's do it.
All right, Kamikaze, you know what time it is. Hit it.
I mean, guys, what are you fucking, is this tonight's stupid question night? Are you guys that fucking stupid? You can't be that fucking stupid. Who gives a shit? One of the dumbest things I've ever read in my life. Fucking common sense. Everybody knows that.
All right, George, here we go. We're going to look back at 2024, and we're going to start with looking at Male Fighter of the Year, which was really a two-horse race this year between Ilia Topuria and Alex Pereira. Not everybody in the industry has announced their choices for Male Fighter of the Year, but looking around at some of the big names, ESPN chose Alex Pereira, CBS Sports chose Ilia Topuria, Tapology chose Ilia Topuria, and get this, UFC.com, for the first time in its history, they had a tie between Ilia Topuria and Alex Pereira. We at MMA Junkie, the award of awards, the one that matters, we chose Ilia Topuria in a staff vote. 12 people voted. It was 8-4, just so you guys know, in favor of Topuria. And here's what I'm going to hit you with here, George. Ilia Topuria's quality over Alex Pereira's quantity could not be ignored for Male Fighter of the Year.
Well, I was one of the four, so I'm already on that.
This is why I chose you. This is why I chose you for this one.
And look, if there was an argument for Topuria, you are right. The quality that Topuria exhibited in 2024 was amazing. He took out two legends, two former champions who have racked up, I think, 8 title defenses between the two of them. And that is impressive, because we're going to argue here over things that, we're splitting atoms here. No one's really wrong. There's just more right or wrong in people's opinions. So I had nothing bad to say about Topuria's year. It was incredible what he did. But I saw one stat in when I was looking back to all this, and somebody had mentioned, I think it was on Junkie's Instagram, one of the comments, somebody had said that Volk and Max Holloway, they're like, their last 7 fights, they just haven't been doing that well. I'm just thinking Topuria may have caught them on the tail end, of their careers. They're still great champions. I get it. But what Pereira did was so special in less than 6 months, and 3 title defenses, 2 former champions, and look, I wasn't all clamoring to see Yuri again after he had just finished them in late 2023. I get that, but they're still proper title fights, and that cannot be ignored. So it's not an overreaction, Simon, but I still disagree. I think it should have been Pereira.
What is this notion that Max Holloway and Alex Volkanovski are washed or on the tail end? Max entered on a 3-fight winning streak, and he had just had what's probably going to be the knockout of the year against Justin Gaethje in a lightweight fight. And Volkanovski, yeah, he had the 2 losses to Islam, but outside of that, the tear that he was on, and he had another featherweight title defense against Yair. Where are we getting this from, that somehow we're going to diminish Topuria's victories over those 2 guys who are really still in their primes? They're still in their primes right now. Why are we diminishing that? Why would anybody do that?
Well, again, we're splitting atoms, and so we got to find, and when you argue, you kind of want to like exploit little things along the way. I'm not saying they're over the hill. I'm saying it could wind up that it looks like maybe he caught them on the tail end. But I cannot disregard their careers, their resumes. It's incredible. It's incredible what Topuria did. And look, I was happy to back you guys at Junkie because, you know, I respect you all. And so as a collective group, we knock our heads and then come to an agreement. That's fine. But I did want to say I was one of the 4 because I just thought what Pereira did was amazing. Sometimes I think the 8 of you
what
kind of
Pereira did
brushed
was
off
amazing.
Pereira as in like, hey, Volk, Holloway, don't talk to me. You know, then the Heisman.
Here's the
What
thing.
Pereira did was special, man. This guy wasn't even training. He had broken toes. You know, he was getting called upon to rescue these big events, and the dude pulled through 3 times.
I know. Believe me. Listen, we were on a live chat several weeks back or a few weeks back where we were talking about the pound for pound #1, and I did say Alex Pereira is my pound for pound #1 fighter in the world right now. But thinking about this in the box of fighter of the year, I ultimately chose Topuria on our vote for fighter of the year, and I just could not get over the fact that he didn't just beat Alex and Max in 1 year. He knocked them both out, and he did that to Max, and nobody had ever done that before. If he had won 2 decisions against those 2 guys, like if Topuria had just beat both Alex and Max by decision, and then I would have gone with Pereira would have been my vote. That's like you talk about splitting atoms. That's the atoms. And in fact, even if he had gone 5 rounds with Max and say he won a barn burner and he beat him, I probably still am going to go with Pereira because those were 3 knockouts. But because there were 2 knockouts and they were definitive, that's the reason why I couldn't ignore Topuria. Just so you know, that's where I was coming from.
Fair. All right.
All right, man. Okay. Well,
It's
male fighter of the year.
digestible, man. Topuria had a great year. Pereira had a great year. So it's, for me, it's digestible. I take the L like a man.
Nah, well, hey, it's not an L. I mean, we congratulate both men. We congratulate Topuria on winning the male fighter of the year from us. Congrats, but also congratulate Alex Pereira, an incredible year, and we'll see what 2025 holds for both of those guys. And so, yeah, you know, congrats to both of them. All right, George, we're going to move on and look back at a big storyline this year in the world of MMA, and that was PFL's acquisition of Bellator. It started off with a bang. You know, back in February, we had that PFL versus Bellator Champions event, which was pretty intriguing. It was fun to watch, provided some good fights. It was largely dominated by Bellator. And so then as this year unfolded, though, George, we started to see some things with Bellator and PFL and just kind of went downhill from there. And so, you know, we've had Bellator events that were canceled. We've got Gegard Mousasi in the middle of a breach of contract lawsuit against PFL. A lot of PFL fighters have been, Bellator fighters have been vocal about not fighting enough, and that includes Patricio Pitbull, who's been clamoring for his release so that he can go to the UFC. I look at all that stuff, George, and I hate to say this. I want to preface that I hate to say this. Let me hit you with this, man. The PFL has completely mishandled the Bellator acquisition this year.
Not an overreaction. I agree. They did start off with a bang, and so I was expecting a lot from it. You know, a couple champions defended in their champion series. I think it was supposed to be 2 per event. That slowly started to fall apart. However, my expectations were a little lower than most because I've seen the UFC do this with Pride. I've seen this do this with WEC and Strikeforce, and I know that the first year can be rough. We're all excited about the matchups, right, and what can happen. But PFL did a good job of saying, "Hey, look, Bellator fighters are doing this." And we already knew what the regular season was going to be made of because when they released the names, we were like, oh, okay, that guy's coming over. She's coming over. And so we were able to kind of do the math and figure it out. But I still felt like Bellator was going to, you know, pick up in the second half of the year. It was a disaster. And now they got these fighters on social media just blasting the company. See, now that going back to Pride, WC, Strikeforce, social media wasn't as prominent and the fighters weren't as vocal.
Right.
Honestly, whiners, but whatever. I mean, some of them have a point. But now fighters whine about everything. I'm not saying this isolated incident. So yeah, that's gotten really, really ugly. And what amazes me is that Bellator hasn't seen this coming and that they haven't already started to right the ship.
I mean, what do you think? Let me ask you this, man. What do you think they can do to right the ship in 2025? Because it's really like It's been crazy to think of like a guy like Patchy Mix in the prime of his career, just on the shelf, dude. We haven't seen Aaron Pico since that event back in February. AJ McKee should be fighting every 4 or 5 months. You know, he's got star potential, but his star potential has completely been quelled since this acquisition. Like, what does Bellator, what does PFL have to do with these fighters? It seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like they are phasing out the Bellator brand, or are they sticking with the Bellator brand? Because that Champion Series event that they have in January, I don't see Bellator on the poster. I see Champion Series, but I don't see Bellator. I'm not sure I'm not sure if they know what they're doing with Bellator as a brand moving forward.
And that's the thing. It makes us lose interest and doubt in their abilities to, run a quality number 2 to the UFC. And they've just dropped the ball. You mentioned Patchy Mix. How about Johnny Eblen? He's got an argument to say, hey, I think I'm the best middleweight in the world. And a lot of middleweights would back him up. Same with Patchy Mix saying it, about the bantamweight division.
Yep.
And yet they're dropping the ball. And I thought the reason they were, part of the reason they were doing this because they don't even have a bantamweight division at PFL, nor a middleweight division. So they could already start, stocking those shelves, we'll say. But I think the best thing that PFL could do at this point is tell us what the heck you're doing. Look at the UFC's already outlined 311 and 312, so we kind of already know January and February, these are the big fights, and they're already playing around with March, whether it's rumors or, fighters leaking things or whatever. You kind of already know the first quarter of this
We don't know.
the first quarter of 2025, and with PFL, there's nothing. So the first thing we got to know is, are you doing a regular season? If so, who is it? And then what are you doing with the rest? And yes, what are you doing with Bellator? What I suggest is borrow what Bellator started with these Grand Prix and, mold it into what you guys did, regular season and playoffs, but only for one weight class. I would introduce either the bantamweights this year or the middleweights this year, and the rest of them, just do it in an arena series and just stack your cards. Give us 6 to 8 per year. That's how Strikeforce found some success, because they were nice and stacked and you'd get excited about them. But if you're going to try and match them with 30, 40 events in the Europe series, in the Africa series, in the Australia series, you're going to lose us.
Thank you, man. I think that's a big thing right now. I think immediately Bellator has tried to hit us with quantity and not really focus on quality. You got to hit us with quality. We need names. Like, you can't be the UFC. The UFC right now is where it is because it built its name on the backs of big names, right? The guys that we now talk about as GOAT status, the big pay-per-view draws, George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, those guys, right? Like those guys, Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz. If you go back even further, we need names, right? With PFL, before the PFL, those 3 letters can matter. The reason why those UFC letters matter right now so much and why it's the main player is because they identified stars. We need stars from PFL that we can relate to. Don't hit us with a quantity business. I think you hit the nail on the head there, George.
Yeah, well, like I say, it's just oversaturated MMA, man. There's so much going on, and you can't expect us to tune in. What was sad was PFL threw a Europe show, I think, to close out the year, and no one really got into it. We didn't hear much about it. No one really got into it. But if you think about it, that's where Ditcheva started. She was a Europe champ the year before, and then she comes blazing through, and now she's the talk of the town. I was about to say something, but I'm not sure if it's a spoiler or not. But yeah, I mean, she's the talk of the town, Dakota Ditcheva. So there should be reasons to tune in, but it's just,
she was our female fighter of the year.
Okay, yeah.
Everyone knows. Oh yeah, we announced that already.
Shopping, drinking the eggnog, so I wasn't sure if I missed that or not, and I didn't want to give anything out. But yeah, she was the fighter of the year for MMA Junkie, so she had a tremendous year. But it started in part of one of their franchises that just doesn't seem to matter as much.
Yeah. Well, like I said, when I started the segment, I hate to say, what I said with my reaction here, that they've botched this, but because I really do think it's important for this industry to have another player besides the UFC.
Yeah.
But, I really hope they right the ship in 2025. We'll see how it plays out, man.
Yeah. I wish them the best, because a strong number 2 pushes the number 1, and everyone gets better along the way. And there's a blueprint. So it's not like they can say, hey, we're finding our footing, we're not sure what to do or whatever. I mean, no, this has happened before. So there's precedence here in acquiring another brand and then putting them into your brand and putting something out. And for them to be, dropping the ball like this, I don't know, it's almost unforgivable.
Yeah. All right, George. Well, those are the two segments I had for you, man. I appreciate you being on the show. Love the Christmas lights around the neck, by the way. But happy holidays to you. Merry Christmas. And I wish you a happy new year as well. All right, man?
Same to you and your family. Thanks for having me. And I'll definitely be tuning in to see what the other guys got to offer.
All right, here we go. Okay, we're going to bring in next the one, the only, the media titan out in Toronto, the Great White North. It's none other than Mike Bohn. Mike, what's happening, man? How you doing?
Yo, not too much. I'm good. Just getting ready for Christmas and New Year's and all that stuff. So this is our off season, or as close as it gets to it. So trying to enjoy it.
And we know that you finished your 2024 with a bang. Mike, for those of you who don't know, recently got engaged. Congratulations to you, man. Popped the question when you were in New York, which was awesome. And I'm so happy that that worked out the way that it did. I'd imagine you were nervous as hell.
Yes, I was very nervous, but it worked out great, and gonna cap off the year with an engagement party with some friends and stuff. So yeah, this has been a great year all around, personal, professional, and everything. So yeah,
love it, man. Love it, man. Love to hear it. All right, let's talk some MMA now, okay? And whereas I was looking back with George on 2024, we're gonna look ahead to 2025. All right, and let's start with Jon Jones, who I know is your GOAT, your greatest of all time. Okay. Jon came back this year in 2024. He had came back from the injury. Took about a year for him to get back from a couple of surgeries. Came back at UFC 309, and he finished Stipe Miocic. He held on to the heavyweight title, but all we've been talking about ever since then is Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall. When is Jon Jones going to fight Tom Aspinall? Well, let me hit you with this about Jon Jones. Okay. 2025, Mike, will be the last year that Jon Jones fights in the UFC, if we're lucky.
I don't think that's an overreaction. I think that's probably pretty on point. The only thing that I really see maybe delaying that is if he suffers another injury or has another personal issue that could delay.
Yeah, this is all in a vacuum. Nothing bad outside the cage happens. This is the last year we see Jon.
For sure. And I guess the only other handicap I'd put on it is if he does fight Tom Aspinall, is he winning or losing that fight? Because if he loses, I couldn't imagine how lucrative a potential rematch would be, whether he wants to do it or not. And then maybe if he wins, you talk about a trilogy. I know we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, like to count 3 Jon Jones fights. We're kind of hoping for just one at this point. But if he wins, most definitely, I can't see him extending it beyond. I think he would ride off on that high, especially if he gets his FU money that he said he wanted from the UFC. So yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment, just given the lay of the land. But yeah, if we're talking about maybe a loss, I think that could extend it. What would the UFC do to keep him around? All those things. But right now, it does feel like we're just setting ourselves up for one finale here.
Do you think? Yeah. Do you think though? It's interesting because I didn't really think about Jon coming back if he lost to Aspinall. You really think Jon would fight one more time if he did lose to Aspinall?
Well, let me flip it on you, Simon. Do you think Jon Jones's ego would allow him to walk away on a loss? I mean, of course, it would depend on if Tom Aspinall humiliated him and like it was completely dominant. Maybe he just said, "I'm past my time. You know, I had some great years. I got this last payday. All good." But I think if even 1% of him felt like he could have done something different or something went wrong this way or the other thing, then I don't know if his ego could allow him to walk away on a loss.
Yeah, I know he's got the massive ego, man, but I feel like what we've been hearing from Jon, I want to believe that he's like a more mature guy, kind of realizes where he's at in his career. Like if he goes and steps in the cage, and let's just say worst case scenario, he got blitzed in some way and, you know, got finished by Aspinall. Is that, I don't know, do you really come back from that outcome? Maybe you come back from a 5-round Alex Gustafsson type war, you know, that you lose and you're like, maybe, you know, something like that. That would set up a big rematch, but would a finish? And it's really weird for me to say Jon Jones being finished. I realize that sounds hilarious and people in the comments are going to skewer me for even suggesting it, but I don't know. Tom Aspinall is a serious threat. If we got that conclusion, does he come back?
I mean, if Tom Aspinall beat him in the way he's been beating guys, like a minute or two, I mean, we don't even know if Tom Aspinall is capable of a 5-round war. We haven't seen anything like that from him, but I don't know. Like, again, it really depends on how Jon would justify things for himself. Like you mentioned that Gustafsson fight, he always knew, like, even though at the time and for many years, that was his closest fight to being a loss up until like the Gustafsson or the Thiago Santos and Dominic Reyes fights. But he'd always say like, you know, was partying up until the weekend before, barely trained, did this. So I think he knew like, I'm a lot better this guy. I beat him without really training at all. If he got knocked out in a minute or two by Tom Aspinall, I feel like he would tell himself like, oh, it's heavyweight, I just got caught, like something like that. I'm still better than him, but it like went on early. If he lost a dominant 5-round decision, maybe that would be the scenario that like isn't close. He's losing in every element. He can't handle Tom's speed on the feet. He can't handle his jiu-jitsu on the ground. It all sounds absurd to kind of say that about Jon Jones, but we're hypothesizing here. So I do think there is scenarios where maybe he would be content walking away and passing the torch, quote unquote. But I do think there's more scenarios where he would be like, nah, like this didn't go right for some reason. I mean, you just look at this past weekend, like Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, like all the things Tyson Fury was saying after that first fight, it was hard for him to comprehend. And then he loses again, and now he's like kind of in this spot. So I feel like it might take 2 losses for Jon Jones to the same guy to be fully accepting of maybe the reality he's not that man anymore.
Interesting. Okay, well, let me touch on the if we're lucky portion of my overreaction there. Play a little devil's advocate here with you, Mike. What if Jon Jones doesn't fight in 2025? Is it possible that he's done? Is it possible that, as I have said before on this program, negotiations go completely sideways with the UFC and with Dana White, and he just walks away on top after beating the greatest heavyweight of all time in Stipe? What do you think of that? Like, I guess, well, let me ask you this. What do you make of the guarantee from Dana White?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the two things, the Dana White thing, that shows a certain level of boldness and confidence that we don't really hear from him. So you wonder if things are maybe already down the line. Maybe they got a verbal agreement or something tentative in place that allowed Dana to display that confidence. So that was kind of my read into that. I think that's a very, very positive sign of where things are going.
You didn't think of it as posturing in some way?
Posturing for who, though? Like, I guess it would just be the fans. Like, we already know that they want this fight. We know Tom wants this fight. We know Jones is kind of, lukewarm to be kind about it. So I just don't know who it's benefiting for him to come out and say that. And if it was completely untrue, like, we haven't heard Jon come out and say,
right,
that's ridiculous. Like, why are you saying 100%? We're still super far away. So
still to come.
Yeah, my thought on that. But to your first part, like, would he be willing to walk away? I think he would if things didn't go well. I mean, he said as much to us at the post-fight press conference in New York. He was like, if I don't get what I want, like if my last moment is knocking out Stipe Miocic in front of President Trump in my home state in this arena headlining Madison Square Garden, like this is a pretty nice way to ride off. And he is completely right about that. In a nutshell, that is a great moment, a lot of memories. You can, tell whoever about my final fight. So I do think he would be willing, and he's shown a willingness to step aside for years on end. I don't think he has that luxury at this point in his life to do something like that. So I do think we would be lucky element. Like if he's going to go, I think he would be fine with his decision to do so. And we'll find out, I think, in the coming months, whether that's going to happen or not.
Okay, and then the last thing I just want to touch on related to Jon going to 2025. Obviously, he was very vocal leading up to 309 that his wish was Alex Pereira. What would you say the chances are that somehow that ends up being his one fight in 2025?
It feels minimal at this point. Like if I had to put a percentage, maybe like 10%. I don't know. Just because I feel like, Alex Pereira, from all signs, I don't know what he's hinting at, saying not Ankalaev. As far as his next fight. So I don't know what they're going to do with him. That should be the fight, and no guarantees he wins that. So if he loses, that derails the entire thing. Pereira's got to keep winning. You could make an argument some of his tougher fights in the division could be coming up. And then, like Jon is obviously, this is the fight they want for him. So it would feel like someone would have to go pretty quirky for them to do that fight.
Okay. All right, man. Okay. Well, that's what we'll see. We'll see what happens with Jon Jones. See if we're lucky if we get him one time. There is a scenario that Mike thinks we could get him twice. So we'll see how this thing plays out with Jones. All right, man. We're going to move on, and we're going to talk about another big star in the UFC, the biggest star in the UFC, Conor McGregor. All right. As we look ahead to 2025, Conor, another year where we didn't have him in the octagon in 2024. He was supposed to fight back in June against Michael Chandler. That fight was finally going to happen after they had filmed The Ultimate Fighter last year. Almost came to fruition, but then he broke his pinky toe and he withdrew. That was a whole thing 1 month before the fight. And then, of course, we thought maybe we would see him in December. At least it felt like there was a possibility like we'd see him this month to close out the year. But then, as we know, Conor was involved in a civil lawsuit where he was accused of sexual assault and was ultimately found liable. So a lot going on with Conor, no surprise. But let me hit you with this one, Mike. 2025 will be yet another year without Conor McGregor in a UFC fight.
Yeah, I know.
Because I know what happened last week in the news, and we can touch on it with the whole Logan Paul thing. But this will be we will not see Conor in a UFC fight this year.
I'm gonna say overreaction because as backwards and messed up as it sounds, I feel like this whole situation he just went through almost makes it more likely that he's gonna fight.
The comeback story, right?
It's already called the greatest comeback in combat sports history, and that was just what him and his team were calling it based off the leg injury. But man, this guy needs some positive PR in his favor, like whatever it may be, and going in there and winning a fight. We've seen before how that can change just the entire outlook in the snap of a finger. So there's a secondary question of who could he come back and fight and beat? That's a whole other thing. But I do think even him going through the fight week process, all that stuff, you get the right dance partner. If you go back to Michael Chandler, I don't think he's going to be throwing everything that he's just endured back in his face as like part of the promotion of the fight. I think the Pauls would absolutely do that. So I'd be a little surprised if he wanted to kind of enter into that whole situation at the moment, but we can touch on that. But as far as a UFC fight, I do think he will effort his best and the UFC will try. It's just a question of like, where is his personal life at? Can he get through a training camp sober and healthy and all that stuff? There's a lot of concern around it, but if he doesn't fight this year and if he can't pull it together to a degree on the back end of this, whether you want to call it a wake-up call or reality check, whatever, then you got to kind of say it's a lost cause. So I guess optimistically, I feel like the table has been set for a comeback, but man, like, I don't know. I said at my bold predictions for the start of 2024, we would get one combined Jon Jones and Conor McGregor fight. That ended up being exactly on point, but we were scheduled for more than that. So I don't know. As I look to 25 and probably do that same point on my column, it might be one combined fight for them again, honestly.
Yeah. Okay. So if for everyone who followed the news last week, Conor saying that he had agreed to a fight in a boxing exhibition against Logan Paul in India, right? Let's just say that happens. And it does feel like there is actual conversations about that happening. At least we had follow-up reports. I know Ariel Helwani had talked about it on his show. Usually a good gauge of whether or not something is at least being seriously talked about or not, right?
Yep.
If that were to somehow happen, and I'm not sure what the timing would be, if it would be in Q1 or whatever the case is. If that was the thing that Dana White hinted at too, right? Which also gives it a little bit more life that it's possible. That presumably is a boxing exhibition in which Conor probably gets paid more than he would ever make from a single UFC fight. What would be the motivation to come back and fight later in the year, though, if he already made a bunch of money from this Logan Paul exhibition that didn't require him to go through, a rigorous training camp? Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I'm thinking too. Like, if that plays out, how would he really come and fight in the UFC later in the year?
Maybe, I don't know. I guess, do they come to an agreement saying if we allow you to do this, you have to come back to us and fight us?
Could they build that in? I guess it's just a TKO thing because Logan Paul is a WWE wrestler as well. Mm-hmm. I suppose they could build that in.
Actually, now that I think back to your initial question, I'm always kind of talking myself out of it if it was an overreaction, because there's the whole TV element of this thing with the UFC, right? And people thought even midway through this year that they're trying to push Conor late in the game. So whoever they are negotiating with, they can say, we have 1 to 2 Conor McGregor fights under our deal we can give you. So maybe this is part of that. They're like, hey, we let you do this boxing match with Logan Paul mid-year, and then you got to fight for us in January of 26 to kick off our new TV deal, or like something like that. So maybe that's how the cards shake out. But yeah, like I would imagine the UFC isn't just going to let him do this, scot-free, and then there's no obligations to come back. Of course, he could agree to a fight and get injured again, or something else could happen. But I do think that would be part of like the concession to do it. And I do think Conor, part of him, I have to think, just knowing how he's spoken over the years, like he does not want the last image of him in the octagon being stretchered out with the broken leg. So I do think we get him back at some point along the line. Dana White says it's going to be end of year. So even if it is a fight, it seems is not going to happen anytime soon. And there is a lifetime of runway when it comes to Conor McGregor between now and then. So that's a little bit scary too.
All right, Mike. Well, I guess we'll see what happens with Conor McGregor. I don't know. I don't know that I just don't see him coming back next year. But, yeah, Conor McGregor being rolled out on a stretcher is not the visual that he would want to finish on. You do have a point there, but he's got a lot of money. He's rich. Dana White has told us that he's rich, and that's why he's not going to come back, Mike. I just can't see why he would do that. But I guess we'll see how it shakes out.
Mm-hmm. We'll see what kind of money there is still to be made when all your kind of endorsements and the things around you are going off. The easiest way to get a bag back in your pocket is a big purse from a fight. So we'll see.
All right, man. All right, Mike. Well, I appreciate you being on. Your portion of the show is done. Congratulations to you, man, on a heck of a year, and definitely with the engagement. I'm really happy for you and Ashley. Wish you guys all the best. I'm looking forward to a wedding really soon.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Take it easy. All right, and now we're going to close out the show. We bring in one more of the MMA Junkie staff. All-stars is what I call us. We've got Danny Segura out in the 305. Danny, what's happening, man? How are you?
All good. Just enjoying the little vacation that we get here at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And excited to talk to you.
Yeah, man. A little bit of a break, right? It's been however many hours of MMA that have gone on this year, 45 events, UFC, whatever. We have a break here, but still lots to talk about as we look ahead to 2025. So you ready to get this going?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, man. All right. I'm going to circle back now to the other guy who was in the conversation for Male Fighter of the Year, and that's Alex Pereira. Okay. Alex Pereira just had a fantastic 2024. Came up a little short in our Male Fighter of the Year vote, but very easily could have been the Male Fighter of the Year. He no doubt is winning it from other media sites in the industry. Heck of a year, the 3 knockouts in 6 months. But as I look ahead to 2025, Danny, let me hit you with this. Alex Pereira will go winless next year.
I think that's
really hard. It's hard for me to say that, but will you think it's a what?
It's an overreaction. I think it is because look, all signs indicate. I know there was that tweet from Pereira, but all signs indicate that Ankalaev should be next. That's probably the toughest fight he can have at light heavyweight due to the styles. But he's already beaten a Jan Blachowicz who is very strong and has a very good wrestling base. He actually used wrestling to beat Israel Adesanya when Adesanya tried to come up at 205. So it's not like we've seen, it's not like it's a huge gap or a huge hole in his game. Talk about Alex Pereira's wrestling. So I can see him losing to Ankalaev, but I can also see him beating him. And also, Pereira, as we know, and as we saw in 2024, like he's a very active fighter. He likes to be active. He's up there in age. He's like, 37 going on 38. He only has a certain amount of paydays left. His star power is the biggest it's ever been. So I would assume he at least gets about 2 or 3 fights next year, probably closer to 3. And if that's the case, like, sure, maybe he loses to Ankalaev, but there's got to be more favorable matchups for him out there. Plus, the UFC, I'm not saying the UFC kind of babies him, but like they do like him to be winning. And I can imagine him getting relatively favorable matchups after the Ankalaev fight.
Yeah, right now, what we have him tied to is Ankalaev, as you just mentioned. He is still, at least as we talked about with Mike, he still at least is a little bit tied to Jon Jones. Maybe there's the slimmest of chance that he would fight Jon Jones at heavyweight. And then, there's this rumor circulating on social media that he could be fighting Khamzat Chimaev at 205, which could be why he maybe, just connecting some dots, maybe that's why he put the tweet out there that Ankalaev's not next. None of those 3 matchups are favorable to him. Like none of the current fights that he is tied to are favorable. He's 37, 38. I don't know. I don't think it gets, I think the decline for Pereira is coming. That's why I'm saying I think he goes winless this year.
I think that's a complete overreaction. I think you are absolutely insane for saying that, but it's part of the show. So,
okay. All right. Well, we'll see how it plays out for Pereira in 2025. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I will say that, Danny. I hope I'm wrong. I've loved seeing the rise of Chama. It's been incredible. It's been absolutely incredible, but I feel like the end is coming. So We'll see how it plays out. Okay, let's move on to another fighter. All right, looking ahead 2025, Kayla Harrison came into the UFC in 2024, made a splash, went 2-0 in the bantamweight division. Really, Dakota Deceva was our female fighter of the year, but Kayla definitely in consideration for that award. Big splash. She beat Holly Holm, finished her back in, when was that, Danny? Beat
300.
Holly Holm back at 300, right, in April, and then she followed that up in October with the unanimous decision of Ketlin Vieira. She's really on track here to have a title fight with Juliana Pena. At least that's what we think. So let me go ahead and hit you with this, Danny. Kayla Harrison, this is 2 parts, just so you know. Kayla Harrison will win the UFC Women's Bantamweight title in 2025, and she will retire as the champion. Nobody's
Also in
taking
2025.
Nobody's taking that belt from her. Once
Okay.
she wins, not going to retire next year, but
Gotcha.
once she wins it, she ain't giving it up.
Oof. I don't think that's an overreaction, but I don't feel comfortable in saying that that's exactly how things are going to go down. I do think that she's going to win the title, and I do think that she beats every single girl right now on the roster. But there's nobody. Amanda Nunes, and Amanda Nunes has always expressed interest in returning. So I know she's not in the roster right now in terms of being an active fighter, but if she were to come back, man, I think that fight's a coin toss. I think that fight could go either way. Nunes, I think, has proven to be more dangerous. We've seen Kayla Harrison lose to Larissa Pacheco, who in a way kind of has a similar style to Amanda Nunes. So I think that's the one fight that would really make me doubt whether Kayla could pull off a win in a fight. But looking at the way things are right now in the division, yeah, I do think she wins the title, and I do think that at least for 2025 she'll be undefeated unless she gets a fight with Amanda Nunes. I think that's the one that makes it a little tricky.
Amanda Nunes is 36 years old. By the time that fight happens, most likely the back half of this year, if it did happen, she'll be 37. She will have been out of action for more than 2 years. I do not expect her to come back and take care of Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison's going to be polished and in her prime and ready to go. I think she takes care of Amanda, man. That's her one challenge. I agree. It's the one, because there's nobody in the current bantamweight roster that's going to hang with Kayla Harrison. So it's almost like a situation where I don't even know who she would really fight, currently. But Amanda, though, I don't see her coming back. A ring rust. Kayla, another level. I think she would prove it. Man.
It's a tough one. And look, Kayla's not young as well. I know she's young to the sport, but she is 34 years of age. And they've trained together. I'm sure that in most of the sparring sessions, I'm assuming that Amanda probably got the best of her as she was coming up, right? Maybe right now things would probably be a little bit more even. There's the whole ATT thing. I can totally see Amanda Nunes getting up, getting motivated for this fight, unlike any other fight. And a motivated Amanda Nunes is extremely dangerous. We've seen what can happen when she's not fully into a fight. But in this case, I think she would really rise up to the occasion. And also, look at her counterpart, a fighter that she's competed with twice, and also that we've compared with as far as like the greatest of all time in the division or in women's MMA. Valentina Shevchenko. Valentina is pretty close to 40. I feel like she's like 38 or something like that.
Valentina's up there. She is up there.
She just won her belt back, and she's looking amazing. I do think that
36. Valentina's 36, by the way.
36. I added a couple of years. I'm sorry, Valentina. Lo siento, perdón. Disculpa. But I'll say this, like, and I don't have any data for this, but I feel like women athletes get to kind of preserve their prime a little bit more. Like, there's not that big of a drop off compared to the men. So I don't know, man. I mean, I don't think you're crazy for saying that. I do not think it's an overreaction. I think it's very, very possible. And I do think that Kayla Harrison is going to go in and out. I don't feel like she's going to linger around the sport for too long, especially with those weight cuts. But I don't know. That's the one fight that's tricky.
All right, man. Okay. Well, I'm excited to see it. There's no doubt in my mind that she's going to handle Juliana Pena with ease. And then hopefully we'll get to see what happens with Amanda and Kayla, but I expect Kayla to pass that test. She's she's incredible, man. And I think she's gonna be in that GOAT conversation when she's done. Okay, man. One last topic, one last fighter I want to talk about as we look ahead to 2025, and that's Paddy the Baddy Pimblett. All right, let's talk about Paddy a little bit here. Paddy had one fight this year in 2024 at UFC 304, where he finished Bobby Green in the first round, which was a pretty incredible performance, I thought, by Paddy. Paddy obviously has been a big star. He's been a rising star, but he's been slowed by injuries, only fighting once in 2023, only fighting once this year. But we know that right around the corner, we have a London event happening, which really sets up Paddy, hopefully, to fight more than once in 2025. So let me hit you with a news flash, Danny. News flash. Paddy Pimblett will finish 2025 ranked in the top 5. I'd love to get the whistle reaction. You're like, wow, I got to think about that one.
Overreaction. I think
this is the year, man.
I think it's an overreaction, not a major one, but I think you're overstepping here a little bit. Look, certainly the promotional aspect in terms of like the UFC accommodating things for him to get there will be there. Sort of the aid will be there. He's not gonna. It's not like one of these fighters that are, under the radar, not very, very well liked by the UFC, and they have to go on, 10 fight winning streak and all this crazy stuff in the promotion in order to get their due. No, I think he'll fairly get an easy route, but I just don't see him beating the top guys. I mean, Bobby Green shooting for a takedown, I'm still perplexed by that. I think if we're going to talk about some of the craziest moments of 2024, I think that's one of them. Like that, what the hell happened there? And look, I do think he's improving. I do think he's a good fighter. I think he's UFC quality, but is he like top 5, top 10? Man, I don't like his chances.
By the end of the year, he will be, man. By the end of the year,
any of his chances against the top 10 guy. Actually, any of his chances against the top 15 guy, I think any of those guys in the rankings would beat him. So
any of them? Now that's an overreaction.
Pick one.
I'll tell you. I came into this here. I'm a little upset. Okay. I'm a little upset. I'm gonna tell you why I'm a little upset. Because just before we started recording this, I looked into our Slack channel where Paddy Pimblett apparently teased his UFC London fight, and the tease was "see you at the top." And I was gonna come into this show, and Kamikaze will tell you pre-production. We were talking about this. That's the fight that should be made, is Paddy Pimblett against Michael Chandler. Paddy Pimblett against Michael Chandler. And when he beats Michael Chandler, that's going to catapult him to just outside the top 5.
And who's going to get him in the top 5?
Justin Gaethje.
No, you're crazy.
I said it.
You're crazy. There's no way in hell.
Justin Gaethje on the decline, bro. Justin Gaethje on the decline. Paddy on the rise. We've seen Paddy in tough positions in his fights. Sure, not against top level competition, but he has faced adversity in some of his fights, and he's overcome this. He's tested. He's going to be tested like he never has before in 2025, but he'll beat Michael Chandler if they fight each other. That'll get him just outside the top 5, and then I can see him fighting perhaps Justin Gaethje after that and getting that win. Then he's a legit title contender.
I think that's the biggest overreaction in the history of this show that's only been around for a few
come on,
relations, a few seconds. 100%. It's crazy. It's insane. I don't think he beats anyone in the rankings. Look, I'll throw a reaction your way. Paddy Pimblett goes winless in 2025. At least against the ranks. At least against people in the rankings.
That's man. Well, listen. He teased, "see you at the top." We could see Chandler and Paddy Pimblett in March, and who knows? That's the one, and that's a really good. Honestly, it's a good fight for Chandler too. I mean, it gives him an opportunity to show that he still got something against the rising star. Plus, sorry, Mike, you're not going to fight Conor McGregor, but you can fight his little clone, you know. But Paddy, though, this is the one he's been working towards this year, dude. This is the year that he's been working toward. This is the year that he proves it. And when we get to the end of the year, Danny, we'll be talking about Paddy Pimblett being a title contender.
Okay, we'll see. I'm gonna write this down because I think that's an interesting take from your part.
All right, man. Well, we'll end it there. The time for overreacting has come to an end. Danny, I appreciate you being on the show. Mike, before you, I appreciate you being on the show. George, to kick things off, I appreciate you being on the show. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Please, if you can, hit that like and subscribe button. It's been a heck of a year. I've really enjoyed the fact that we've got this ORT thing going. Danny, I hope you've enjoyed your appearances. Everything's been good.
Yeah, it's a fun show. Really enjoying the way this is coming together. And I've seen the comments too. The fans have enjoyed it too.
I hope so. And I hope everybody continues to tune in. We're going to take next week off. This is our last show of the year. We will take the new year off, and then we'll be back in the beginning of January. So for everybody who's tuned in, I appreciate you. And we will see you next year on Overreaction Time. So long.
MMA Junkie AI.